Have you ever felt like you're like bad at English? Because you don't sound like someone from, say, England or America. Well, guess what? That's totally the wrong goal.
It really is.
Today we're going to deep dive into why chasing that native level English dream is kind of a trap, and more importantly, what you should be focusing on to become a confident communicator.
Right, yeah.
So we've been hearing from a lot of you about wanting to improve your English skills, which is awesome. But it's interesting how many get hung up on sounding exactly like a native speaker.
Yeah, it's a common thing, and honestly, it kind of misses the point of language, you know? It's all about connecting, communicating.
Right. Getting your ideas across.
Exactly, like you wouldn't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, right?
Love that analogy. It's so true. And here's another thing to think about. Even native English speakers don't always speak perfectly.
Oh, absolutely not.
I mean, they make grammar mistakes, use filler words, sometimes even struggle to find the right word. So why should that be the standard for someone learning English?
Yeah, like who gets to decide what perfect English even is?
Right. Especially when you consider how global English is.
Totally. I mean, think about it. Nigerian English, for example, it has its own unique rhythm, vocabulary, even tonal inflections that are completely different from, say, American English.
But both are completely valid, right?
Exactly. And both are effective for communication. In fact, the research we looked at actually suggests that clinging to this native speaker ideal can actually hinder your progress.
Really?
Yeah, it's almost like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work.
You're putting all this pressure on yourself to sound a certain way.
Exactly. And it can actually make you less confident, less fluent.
So what should English learners be focusing on instead? If not sounding like a native speaker, then what?
Well, in a nutshell, clarity.
Okay, clarity.
Can people understand you? Can you get your point across? That's what matters. Think about it. Would you rather be understood by a diverse group of people or sound like a native speaker but struggle to actually, express your ideas effectively?
That's a good point.
It's all about communication, right?
Right. But what about, like, cultural context? Doesn't that play a role, too? I mean, there's slang, idioms.
Absolutely. Native speakers use all sorts of expressions and references that can be super confusing for non-native speakers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, like, imagine trying to understand Cockney rhyming slang in London or Southern idioms in the US.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
Right. So mastering internationally understood language is far more useful in our globalized world.
Makes sense. But wouldn't, I don't know, at least trying to sound like a native speaker boost your confidence? Even a little.
You'd think so, right? But ironically, it can actually do the opposite. Yeah. Forcing a native-like accent can make you less confident and you start overthinking, making more mistakes because you're so focused on how you sound that you're not really present in the conversation.
Yeah, you're not really connecting with the person you're talking to.
Exactly. And that's a key point here. The goal of language learning should be connection, not mimicry.
I like that. Connection, not mimicry.
Yeah. It's about building relationships, having meaningful conversations, with people from all different backgrounds.
Right. Not trying to fit into some narrow box of what you think you should sound like.
Exactly. It's about breaking down barriers, not reinforcing them. It's about recognizing that your unique voice, with all its inflections and nuances, actually adds to the richness of communication. It doesn't detract from it.
So instead of trying to sound like someone else, we should be focusing on developing our own authentic voice in English.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
Cool. So if we ditch this whole native speaker goal, then what should we be aiming for? What's the new target?
Well, I'd say there are three key things: clarity, confidence,
Okay.
and connection. Those are the cornerstones of effective communication.
Clarity, confidence, and connection. Got it.
Think about people like Jackie Chan or Sofia Vergara.
Oh, yeah. Great examples.
Their accents are a part of who they are, and it hasn't stopped them from being incredibly successful communicators.
Right. And they connect with audiences worldwide.
Exactly, because their focus is on getting their message across clearly and authentically.
So how can our listeners start working on these three elements, these cornerstones you mentioned? Clarity, confidence, connection. Where did they even begin?
Well, the sources we looked at offer some great insights. One of the biggest takeaways is to focus on what's called functional language.
Functional language. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that mean?
Basically, it means instead of getting bogged down in all the complex grammar rules or memorizing every idiom in the dictionary, focus on the language you need for everyday life. Practical stuff, ordering food, asking for directions, having conversations at work.
Oh, so like mastering those everyday situations.
Yeah, exactly. Like imagine yourself confidently navigating daily life in an English-speaking environment. That's the power of functional language.
It's about building that solid foundation.
Exactly. It's like having the tools to build a house, but you don't need to start with the fancy decorations.
Right. Get the foundation down first.
Exactly. And speaking of building, one of the biggest fears for language learners is making mistakes.
Oh, for sure.
But the sources we looked at, they really emphasize that mistakes are they're part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
Exactly. Even native speakers. It's how we learn, how we grow.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be imperfect.
I love that because it's true. Embrace those mistakes. See them as valuable opportunities to learn and improve.
So instead of getting discouraged, we should see them as stepping stones, right?
Exactly. Stepping stones on your language learning journey. And you know what? Something else that came up in the research was this idea of not being afraid to ask for clarification.
Oh, interesting. You mean like if you don't understand something, just ask?
Exactly. It's actually a sign of strong communication skills, not a weakness.
Huh. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it shows that you're actively listening, that you're engaged in the conversation.
So, like, if I didn't catch what someone said, it's totally fine to ask them to repeat themselves.
Of course. Or to explain it differently. It helps avoid misunderstandings, keeps the communication flowing.
And this applies to everyone, right? Not just non-native speakers.
Absolutely. Native speakers do it all the time. It's just part of, normal conversation.
This is really making me rethink how I approach language learning. It's not about erasing who I am or trying to sound like someone else. It's about using my own voice to connect with the world,
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about embracing your individuality and expressing yourself authentically.
So we've talked about ditching the native speaker goal, focusing on clarity, confidence, and connection.
Right.
And we've touched on functional language and not being afraid to make mistakes or ask for clarification. What else? What other practical steps can our listeners take to improve their English?
Well, pronunciation is definitely important.
Okay. But not in the way we might think, right?
Exactly. It's not about erasing your accent. Remember, your accent is a part of you.
Right. It's part of your identity.
It's about making sure that those key sounds are clear, understandable.
So it's more about clarity than completely changing how you speak.
Precisely. Like, think about tuning a musical instrument. You want each note to be clear, resonant, even if the instrument has its own unique sound.
Ooh, we like that analogy. So it's like refining your pronunciation so your message comes through loud and clear.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important aspect, vocabulary building.
Okay, vocabulary.
The sources we looked at suggest focusing on words that help you express your ideas precisely.
Right. Not just using fancy words to impress people.
Right, exactly. Because sometimes I catch myself doing that, trying to use big words that I don't even fully understand.
Oh, totally. Guilty as charged.
It happens, but remember, clarity over complexity.
Clarity over complexity. Got it.
Choose words that convey your meaning effectively, authentically. And you know what? One of the best ways to expand your vocabulary is to actively listen to how others speak.
Oh, yeah, good point. Like picking up new words and phrases from conversation.
Exactly. It's like learning by osmosis. Pay attention to how other English speakers from all different backgrounds and accents express themselves.
And it just reinforces that there's no one right way to speak English, right?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it. There's so much diversity, so much adaptability.
And speaking of adaptability, active listening. That's another big one, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's not just about waiting for your turn to speak.
Right. It's about actually like engaging with the other person, trying to understand their perspective.
Exactly. Active listening involves picking up on key points, asking clarifying questions,
Uh-huh.
and responding in a way that shows you're present, you're really in the conversation.
It's like a whole body experience, not just a mental one.
Exactly. Tuning into all the nuances of communication, both verbal and nonverbal.
It's like being a communication detective.
I love that. And we talk about not being afraid of mistakes, and the sources really hammered home that point. They even called them learning opportunities.
Learning opportunities. I like that framing.
Right. Because mistakes are inevitable. They're actually valuable feedback.
Yeah.
Each mistake helps you refine your skills, get closer to fluency.
It's like that saying, you win or you learn. There's no failure, only growth.
Exactly. And embracing that mindset is so important for building confidence.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're constantly worried about messing up, it's hard to relax and just be yourself.
Exactly. So the sources emphasize this shift from perfection to progress. Celebrate the small victories, acknowledge how far you've come.
Focus on the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And you know what? Confidence actually breeds fluency.
Oh, interesting. So the more comfortable you are with your English, the more confident you'll sound, and the better you'll communicate.
Precisely. It's like a positive feedback loop.
I like that. And, one thing that really stood out to me from the research was this idea of exposing yourself to different accents.
Oh, yeah, that's so important.
They were talking about listening to podcasts from, all over the world, Australia, South Africa, Ireland.
Yes, it's like creating your own personal English language immersion program.
I love that. Expanding your ear for all the different ways English can sound.
Exactly. It helps you become a more versatile listener and a more adaptable speaker.
It's like giving your ears a workout.
Ha ha, exactly. And the more you listen, the more you realize that there isn't just one right way to speak English.
Right. It's about appreciating the richness, the diversity of the language.
Exactly. And recognizing that your own accent is a valuable part of that diversity.
Your accent is part of your story.
Exactly. It adds a unique flavor to your English.
It's like seasoning your language with your own personal spice blend.
Aha, I love it. And speaking of adding flavor, we talked earlier about not being afraid to ask for clarification.
Oh, right.
And the sources really emphasize that. It's a sign of good communication, not a weakness.
Yeah. It shows you're paying attention.
Exactly. It helps avoid misunderstandings, ensures that everyone's on the same page.
It's like saying, hey, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly.
Exactly. And it's something everyone does, even native speakers. We've all had those moments where you're like, wait, can you repeat that? Or can you explain that a different way?
Right, totally. It's just a natural part of communication.
It is. And it all ties back to that important skill of active listening.
Okay.
It's not just about hearing the words. It's about really understanding the meaning behind them, the nuances, the context.
It's like reading between the lines, right? Picking up on what's not being said.
Exactly. It's about listening with your whole being, not just your ears.
I like that.
Active listening involves paying attention to the speaker's tone of voice, their body language, their facial expressions.
It's like becoming a communication detective.
Haha, yes. Gathering all the clues to decipher the full meaning of the message, and the more you practice active listening, the better you become at understanding those subtle nuances of communication.
And that will make you a better communicator yourself, right?
Exactly. It's all connected. And speaking of connected, remember we talked about functional language, mastering those everyday phrases and expressions.
Right, the building blocks.
Exactly. It's so important for navigating those common situations we encounter every day. Like ordering food, asking for directions, making small talk with colleagues.
It's like having a toolbox full of essential communication tools.
Love it. And the more you use those tools, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
So it's not just about learning the words and grammar rules. It's about actually putting those things into practice in real-life situations.
Precisely. Bridging the gap between theory and practice.
Between knowing the language and actually using it?
Exactly. It's about making English a part of your life, not just a subject you study.
That's such a great point. And another thing that stuck with me from the research was this idea of choosing your words carefully.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not about using the biggest, fanciest word you can find.
Right.
It's about using the words that most effectively convey your meaning.
Exactly. Being clear, concise, authentic.
Letting your personality shine through your words.
Exactly. And that brings us back to embracing your accent.
Oh, right.
Because your accent is a part of your identity, your story. It adds a unique dimension to your English.
It's like adding your own personal flair to the language.
Exactly. Embrace it. Let it be a part of what makes your communication special and memorable.
It's about celebrating the diversity of English and recognizing that there's no one right way to sound.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And, this whole conversation about confidence, authenticity, embracing your individuality, it reminds me of another key point the sources emphasized, focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
It means, enjoy the journey of language learning, celebrate the small victories along the way.
Okay, yeah.
Don't get so fixated on reaching some mythical native level that you forget to appreciate how far you've already come.
It's like that saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Exactly. And when you shift your focus to the process, it takes the pressure off, allows you to relax into the experience of learning.
It makes it more enjoyable, more sustainable.
Precisely. And that enjoyment, that sense of playfulness actually helps you learn more effectively.
It's like our brains become sponges, soaking up the language effortlessly.
Exactly. And this brings us full circle to our core message. Clear communication. When you're relaxed, confident, and genuinely enjoying the process, you communicate more effectively.
Because you're not so worried about making mistakes or sounding a certain way. You're just being yourself.
Precisely. And that authenticity, it shines through. It's what makes your communication engaging, relatable, impactful.
Yeah, it's like all that pressure just melts away and you can actually focus on connecting with the person you're talking to.
Right. And that's what it's all about in the end, isn't it? Connection.
Totally. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want our listener to walk away with today?
The biggest takeaway, I think it's to just let go of that native speaker myth.
Let it go.
It's a distraction, honestly. It's a limiting belief that can really hold you back.
Yeah, it can.
Embrace your unique voice, prioritize clear communication, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of learning English.
Beautifully said. It's about celebrating all the different ways English is spoken around the world and using it as a tool to connect with others.
Exactly. And, communication is about so much more than just words.
Right.
It's about building bridges, sharing experiences, fostering understanding.
It's about that human connection that goes beyond language barriers.
Well said. Now, dear listener, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated most with you from this deep dive?
Yeah. What really stuck with you?
What's one step you can take to shift your focus away from sounding native and toward communicating clearly and confidently?
Share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear them.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep communicating authentically.
That's it. Keep up the great work, everyone.
Happy communicating.